Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are on page 293, Supermind, Mind, and the Overmind Maya. Last session, Ranga had read this entire long paragraph, and so today he will comment on it. The line begins, in its nature and law, the overmind is a delegate of the supermind consciousness.
Before we start reading the paragraph, we should know the context. Okay. The chapter is Supermind, Mind and the Overmind Maya. When we are in the ignorance of the normal human mind, I use the word ignorance because we don't know anything. We don't know the fundamental truth of anything at all. We are completely possessed by our body-mind life. We don't possess the body-mind life, so therefore we are just puppets in the hands of nature. So we don't know anything. But when there is an aspiration to know what we are, what the universe is there anything called God, then there is a search that starts. And the search normally will take you either inside into yourself or above. So, even when you go above into the spiritual planes of consciousness, there is a lot of illumination, but there is still a lot of problem. Many problems are not solved. You don't understand. Still, there are many questions unsolved. So, Sri Aurobindo is going step by step to see where he can find the ultimate solution to all the problems of life. So, you go first to mind, and then you are in ignorance. So, you go above the mind, you become what is known as Trigunatita. You lose your identification with body-mind life, go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, which are, in Sri Aurobindo's view, four generally. Higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind, overmind. Yes. Then, above that is the supermind. Even in the overmind consciousness, there are a lot of problems. But when you go to the supermind or you get a touch of the supermind, then you see that that is the origin of creation, and many problems which you could not understand. In fact, all problems get solved when you go to the supramental level. But nobody has been able to go and stabilize their consciousness in the supermind, but you can get touches of the supermind even in the lower planes of consciousness. So Sri Aurobindo is doing this climbing up. Now he has come right up to the overmind level. Sri Aurobindo realized the overmind in 1926, 24th November. And when that happened, Sri Krishna himself descended into the very body of Sri Aurobindo. Okay, so that's overmind consciousness. It is a much more wide and more illuminated than the lower planes, and yet it is not yet the supermind. In other words, in overmind consciousness also, you see multiplicity, you see difference. You see spirit and matter, you see both, but they seem to be unconnected at the overmind level. Only when you go to the supermental level, the connection is very clearly established. So now, with this background, we start reading.
Now, didn't Sri Aurobindo say that Sri Krishna's descent into him prepared for the supermind? It was a preparation.
I think he was getting touches even before that.
Well, Vivekananda had talked to him.
Yes, Vivekananda had talked to him.
For weeks, I think.
Yeah, so he knew theoretically what the supermind is. So when he realized the overmind, he knew that the description given by Vivekananda is not exactly fitting. So he knew that there is something even higher than overmind. So he put in his extra effort, withdrew from the public eye, put mother in charge of the ashram, and started concentrating like anything. From 1926 onwards, he was not physically in touch with anybody except mother. When he had that accident, Champaklal and Narad were looking after him, And even the evening talk started.
With Purani.
With Purani and many others. Okay, there were Satyendra, Purani, then Bechar Lal and many others were also there. But otherwise, he wanted to concentrate fully on that and exclude all unnecessary influences which come in when you are in the physical world. You are imposed upon by physical forces, vital forces, mental forces, and universal forces. So he wanted to keep all this out and concentrate himself. So now he is going to describe the overmind consciousness. So remember that in the overmind, you are still, since you are seeing multiplicity and you are not seeing the absolute oneness of spirit and matter, you are still that touches of ignorance even in the overmind. Okay? So, in its nature and law, the overmind is a delegate of the supermind consciousness. It's delegate to the ignorance. Now the word delegate is very interesting. You can use the word ambassador. An ambassador of one country sits in another country, represents him, and he has got certain powers because he has got powers of representation, and yet he does not have the full power of the original country. He has to refer back. So that is exactly, in other words, supermind, when it comes down and takes a sort of limited form, it becomes the overmind. The overmind is a reduced and diminished condition of supermind. You can say that.
But he calls it a delegate to the ignorance.
Pardon?
A delegate to the ignorance.
Yes, because that is where the ignorance starts. Ignorance starts from the overmind level. So, ignorance is one country, knowledge is another country, and knowledge is deputing its someone to represent in the ignorance, and that is the overmind consciousness. You can put it that way. Okay, so it's delegate to the ignorance. Or we might speak of it as a protective double, a screen of dissimilar similarity through which supermind can act indirectly on an ignorance whose darkness could not bear or receive the direct impact of a supreme light. Now here again he is explaining what he means by protective double. It is similar to the overmind, it is similar to the supermind, and yet it is different. Its luster, the supermind luster, is so intense that a normal human consciousness will not be able to bear it. Therefore, it reduces its luster to that of the overmind, and then there it is possible to, from that level, it is possible again to contact the supermind. So it's very interesting, the words he is using very clear. Protective double, a screen of dissimilar similarity. There is similarity like a shadow. There is a similarity between your profile and the shadow profile, but the shadow is not you at all. Okay, so it's something like that. A protective double. And protective because the intensity of the supermind is too much. In ignorance, you have to be protected. Even at our level, our body is dense and very, very limited, but that's a protection. If you go into the cosmic consciousness outside your body without sufficient preparation, you are open to all sorts of problems and all sorts of dangers. So your body is actually protecting you. Okay, so there at that level, the overmind is protecting you from the glare, intense glare of the supermind. That's what he's saying. Protective double, a screen of dissimilar similarity through which supermind can act indirectly on an ignorance whose darkness could not bear or receive the direct impact of a supreme light. Very clear?
Very clear.
Yeah. So, he says, even it is by the projection of this luminous overmind corona that the diffusion of a diminished light in the ignorance and the throwing of that contrary shadow which swallows up in itself all light, the inconscience, became at all possible. So, once the luster of the supermind reduces itself and comes to the overmind level, the first step towards ignorance has been taken. And if the first step is taken, the rest follows automatically. So if the overmind is not there, there can be no inconscience. So that's the beginning of the descent. The huge holocaust, he calls it in Mother's The Mother. It's a descent of the divine from utter light into utter darkness, which is the, and it's the, he's using an interesting word, he's saying the
Corona.
contrary shadow.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting because the highest and the lowest are very similar in so many ways. Okay, it is infinite. The superconscient is infinite. So is the inconscient infinite. The superconscient is a seed condition from which everything comes out. Manifestation comes out from the top. But the inconscient also is a seed condition. It contains in itself life, matter, supermind, mind, everything. It contains even God. Okay. So that also is a seed condition. Infinite, infinite. Seed condition, seed condition. Formlessness, formlessness. Both.
But then Sri Aurobindo insists on the separation of the two hemispheres. Like one has to be in the higher in order to change the lower.
You have to go to the higher. When you are in the lower, you are in the darkness. And when you are in the darkness and you get fed up with the darkness, you want...
You said God is there even in that lower hemisphere.
In essence.
In essence.
In seed form. Is the mango tree not there in the seed? But it's there.
And is everything not the divine?
And also, like Sri Aurobindo also talks about the mother. The mother is also there in the lower prakriti, working in the lower prakriti and the higher prakriti.
When you say mother, exactly what do you mean?
The Shakti.
If you say the divine force,
Divine force.
that's fine.
So she's working in the lower prakriti and the
Yeah.
higher prakriti.
Lower prakriti, it becomes the opposite of Shakti. It becomes the opposite of Shakti. Incapacity.
But how is the nature of the work different? I want to know for my understanding.
Okay.
What is the difference of the working in the lower prakriti and the higher prakriti? Like how does the play of forces change?
The working of what?
The play of the force, the divine force.
Oh.
How does it change in these two hemispheres and how to reconcile?
I'm thinking of how to put it. Okay. So, actually, the working also gets diminished. It becomes only a potential. Okay. At the highest level, there is light. Okay. And that light, when it wants to manifest, it starts becoming less and less and less and less until finally it becomes here total darkness. But it is not total darkness. There is if you want to put it in mathematical terms, you can say 100% light above, and as it keeps coming down, this is not 100% darkness. It is 0.00000001 of light is there. And because it is light and because it is divine, there is an urge for it to break out of its prison. So evolution takes place that way. That's why it takes 1,000,000 years. Okay? First of all, life comes out. But that life has come out of matter, it has taken 1,000,000 years. Actually, even from the inconscient, matter also has come out. That's the first step. We don't think of it that way. We feel that matter and inconscient are the same. No, they are not. Even matter has got a little bit of consciousness and energy. But the inconscient is almost total nothingness. So, there is a working, but it's highly diminished. But because it is essentially divine, it is making tremendous effort to break out of its prison of darkness. But it takes a long time. But when life has come, the same urge of perfection is there, but now it is slightly faster. Because light is more in the life than in the matter. Then in mind it becomes even faster, even faster. So it goes on increasing when it goes. So when you are in touch with the highest, naturally it goes very fast. But so long as you are in the ignorance, okay, your soul is trapped in your body, mind, life, it takes time for it to discover itself.
And sometimes the soul can be in both regions. Sometimes the soul can be in both regions, like in the light and yet struggling.
The consciousness of the
Consciousness.
the individual soul is that also, yes, because it's consciousness after all. So that also, it depends on the your spiritual experience. In fact, if you normally we are stationed only in one plane of consciousness. The consciousness is stationed in one plane, but if it can remain on several planes. Okay, like the waking samadhi, for instance. Samadhi, your waking consciousness is sleeping. You are not conscious of the physical world, but you are fully conscious in whichever plane you are in the higher levels. But a waking samadhi is you are in that higher consciousness, but you are fully knowledgeable about what's going on in the physical world.
I want to ask you about this light a little bit more, because Sri Aurobindo says, and I've quoted it before, our sense by its incapacity has invented darkness. In truth, there is only light.
Yes, that's right. So, because, let me put it this way. There is a reality. Okay? There is a reality from the highest level to the lowest level. At the highest level, call it God, call it Satchidananda, call it whatever you want. That's a reality. But this reality is manifesting itself. And when it is manifesting itself, it reduces itself. What is it reducing? It reduces its substance, it reduces its consciousness, it reduces its ananda, it reduces its force. Reduction is essential for manifestation. We have discussed that many times. Whenever you want to manifest something, it has to take a form. And a form is limitation of something. Without a limit, a form is always limited. Without limitation, there cannot be any form. So, there is a limitation that comes, and it comes. So, this is the reality. Who is experiencing the reality? Is there someone who is experiencing the reality? So, there is a witness consciousness which is experiencing the reality. Okay? At the lowest level, the worm is experiencing the world through certain senses which nature has kindly given to it. Then the caterpillar is also experiencing reality. So there is this reality and there is this consciousness in low forms. A cat also is experiencing reality. A dog is experiencing reality. You are experiencing reality. Okay? So, what are you experiencing reality with? You need instruments to experience it. To experience something, you need instruments. So, it's our senses which are seeing the reality. But our senses are very limited. So, they are seeing the reality wrongly. That is why seeming, okay, when you are at this level, you are seeing something which is not the reality. I'll be even more specific. We have discussed this many times, but I'm being specific. My eyesight is not at all what it could be. Okay, my eyesight is seeing only the Vibgyor range, infrared, ultraviolet. I don't see, so I'm not seeing the entire reality. I'm seeing only a range of reality. Similarly, my ears. Okay, I don't. So, in the caterpillar, nature has given some instruments of knowledge. Cat, dog, man, instruments of knowledge. The yogi, when he goes above his senses. He is using instruments of knowledge which are beyond the senses. So he starts seeing the reality in a much, much better way. Okay? So as you keep going up, the instruments of knowledge go on changing. Okay? So that's the explanation for what you are asking. It's clear now. I am seeing broken. Okay? We said that instruments of knowledge are defective. I can make it even more graphic and I can tell you, at our level, we are born with broken specs. That's our eyesight. So I am seeing everything broken. I am seeing multiplicity. There is no multiplicity. Let the broken specs be full, I see the reality. I don't see any more broken things. So that happens when you go up, 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 up. At the highest level, no instruments are necessary because you yourself become the reality. That's knowledge by identity.
Excellent.
So now you can understand how this reality, what you are seeing, is not the reality. There is actually no multiplicity. You are seeing the multiplicity because you are ignorant. But even at this level, if you start using different instruments of knowledge, then you will start seeing the reality, even here. That's what happens to yogis. They are not using the senses. They are using instruments much more. They are using identification, they are using light, they are using intuition. These are the powers that come in. Okay? So that's the explanation for you. I think it's clear, huh?
Very clear.
Yeah. So, we are in the... So the supermind makes the overmind is delegate, and it's a first step downwards. So once that is there, Srivastava says, there is nothing to stop it from going down. Okay? A facile descent. He uses Latin words for that. I can't pronounce the Latin words, but a facile descent. The first step having been taken, there is nothing to stop it from going the whole range, and you come into total inconscience. Okay? So I'm reading that sentence again. Even it is by the protection of this luminous overmind corona that the diffusion of a diminished light in the ignorance and the throwing of that contrary shadow which swallows up in itself all light, the inconscience, became at all possible. Because the overmind came into the picture. For supermind transmits to overmind all its realities, but it leaves it to formulate them in a movement and according to an awareness of things which is still a vision of truth, and yet at the same time a first parent of the ignorance. He is explaining very clearly how it's a delegate. It is supramental essentially, and yet it has limited itself. And why is the limitation? Very interesting. The supermind contains movement, but there is no movement in the supermind at all. Okay? But the overmind, the movement starts. And movement is very interesting because static condition, the divine is static, immutable, permanent, because he doesn't need to change. He is perfect. But the overmind, movement starts. Action. Force starts making movements. And then in the physical world, there is constant movement. So movement, dynamism, and static condition. So that's the supermind is static, but it has the potentiality of dynamism, but that potentiality translates into a reality in the overmind. The overmind is the first starts a movement of manifestation. This idea of movement and static condition is one of the differences between spirit and matter. Okay, consciousness, unconsciousness, static condition, immutability, mutability, static, dynamic. So the dynamism, the movement starts at the overmind level. That's what he's saying. Okay.
Sri Aurobindo says that it transmits to overmind all its realities.
Yes. Yet it leaves it to formulate it. Okay, see that? Okay?
Yes.
So that's the reason why when you are in the overmind consciousness, you get glimpses. You understand the essence of supermind, although you are not in the supermental consciousness. You understand. Okay? For supermind transmits to overmind all its realities, but it leaves it to formulate them in a movement. Okay? Formulate, make forms. I told you the highest is infinite formless. So it allows overmind to make forms. And making forms means manifestation. We discussed that.
And limitation.
Yes, limitation and manifestation. So it starts at the overmind level. Okay. But because there is form and limitation, It becomes ignorance. That's the origin of the ignorance. Ignorance you can define as seeing the multiplicity only. You don't see the oneness. When you see multiplicity, you are not seeing the reality. Essentially, you have to see the oneness everywhere. There are 5 or 6 of you sitting there. I see you all separate. Essentially, your bodies are made of the same stuff. Your vital, which I don't see, is also made of the same stuff. Mind also made of the same stuff. So if I am in that consciousness of knowledge, I should see the oneness, which is more important than the separation. But at my level, I am seeing only the separation and not the oneness. I can think of oneness, but that's not the reality. I have to see the oneness and experience it. Okay? So, this key sentence, okay? He's saying, leaves it to formulate them in a movement. So, 2 key words. Formulate, in other words, give a form to, and in a movement. And according to an awareness of things which is still a vision of truth, and yet at the same time a first parent of the ignorance. So, it's like I look up, I see the reality. I look down, I start seeing the beginning of unreality.
So this movement is understood in science.
Yes.
Because everything is in vibration.
Yes. But science itself does not know that all movement originates from a silence. They have not yet come to that.
Yes, not yet, no.
In fact, the idea of silence and immutability is not there at all in science.
But in music, they are opening to that aspect.
Pardon?
In music, they are open to the aspect of silence.
Not only music, but I tell you, there is very interesting. If you are interested, I'll send you that video. There is a scientist, okay?
Oh, fantastic video.
And he has realized, he has had spiritual experiences.
The consciousness is not in the brain, it fills the brain.
Yeah.
So brilliant.
Yeah. There are a lot of scientists who are understanding these things now. But still, science in its traditional regions, it is still hardcore materialistic. But there is a lot of change coming.
I asked Dr. Dalal, do they admit there is a soul as yet? He said, no way.
Not soul.
No.
But consciousness, yes.
Yes.
Consciousness as a fundamental reality, scientists are beginning to admit.
No, in psychology. In psychology, are they admitting soul and they are not?
I don't know enough of Western psychology, so I can't say.
But it's such a irony, like psychology, like the first thing that you're taught, like the definition of psychology is the study of the psyche, which is the soul. So I don't know, how can a subject whose definition is study of the soul will not address the soul?
Which branch of psychology are you talking about? In the West, psychology, there is something called transpersonal psychology.
That's what she studied.
Transpersonal psychology is transpersonal. Yes. So there is no question of soul. It's universal consciousness. Okay? It's universal consciousness.
You got it? Good. Okay.
But universal consciousness, they can't think of it as individualizing itself. I don't think they've come to that yet. Okay? The first parent of the ignorance. A line divides supermind and overmind, which permits a free transmission, allows the lower power to derive from the higher power all it holds and sees, but automatically compels a transitional change in the passage. So, there is he calls it a translucent veil, okay, between supermind and overmind. So, there is an exchange, okay, but it is still, it's a barrier. He says it's a barrier, okay, so. like you have in our body also, there are membranes which are osmosis. Okay, so there is a membrane, but liquids from one can go to the other level. Okay, but it gets purified. The kidney works on that principle. The uh, the poisons come out, and the real stuff is written and put into the blood. So the overmind consciousness and this overmind consciousness, there is this veil which allows transmission, and yet it's a veil.
Yeah, we understand this osmotic action, especially in horticulture, because we have found that there are nutrients that can be absorbed
Yes,
so perfectly
yes,
and
that's right.
change the character of a thing.
Yes, that's right. In fact, they use that principle even for filtering water. No? Reverse osmosis, they call
Yes,
it. So
exactly.
it allows water to remove all the impurities. So, something like that. There is a veil between the higher, the supermind and the overmind. It allows transmission, and yet it's a veil. Okay. Which permits a free transmission, allows the lower power to derive from the higher power all it holds and sees, but automatically compels a transitional change in the passage. There is a diminution. Okay. The integrality of the supermind keeps always the essential truth of things, the total truth and the truth of its individual self-determinations clearly knit together. It maintains in them an inseparable unity, and between them a close interpenetration and a free and full consciousness of each other. But in overmind, this integrality is no longer there. Now, if I give you an image, you will understand what he is saying in this para. Okay. If you think of the supermind as a sea, okay, a sea of pure substance, not salty water, but pure substance. It's a sea at rest. Okay, that's stage number one of the supermind. Then, in the supermind, the potentiality of the waves forming comes at the second level of the supermind. He calls it the second status, okay, of the supermind. The triple status of supermind. First is total silence, total no waves at all. The second, waves start forming. What are these waves? Individual forms. Okay? So, in the second status of the supermind, if you experience that, that's what you will feel, that each wave is a person who is fully conscious that he is part of the sea, cosmic consciousness. Yet, I am an individual experiencing my cosmicity. In the third level, the individuality becomes more important than the cosmicity. Okay? When you come down into the overmind consciousness, individuality takes over. That's what he's saying. Okay? The triple status of supermind, potentially oneness is there and potentially many is also there. But when it comes down to the overmind consciousness, the many becomes the dominant factor. You can see also, it's not that you don't see the oneness with the overmind consciousness. You see, but it's not as important and as real as the multiplicity. Okay? So I'll read that sentence again. With this picture that we have given, you see what you'll understand what he's saying. The integrality of the supermind, integrality, okay, no division of the supermind, keeps always the essential truth of things, the total truth, and the truth of its individual self-determinations. The individual self-determinations, you can think of it there as the souls, the individual souls. Okay? Individual self-determination, but they are clearly knit together. That's why when you go to the self, you feel that my soul is the soul of everybody else. Clearly knit together. They are separate, and yet there is a close connection between all of them. Again, if you want to picture something yourself, think of an Indian joint family. It is one, and yet there are so many. There are uncles and aunts and cousins and whatnot, but they are all knit together. It's a very bad example, but you can understand to a certain extent what he's saying. Individuality is there, but they are all knit together. Okay? In a close interpretation and free and full consciousness of each other. But in the overmind, the integrality is no longer there. That total oneness is gone in the overmind consciousness. And yet, the overmind is well aware of the essential truth of things. It embraces the totality. It sees the individual self-determinations without being limited by them. Okay? But although it knows their oneness, can realize it in a spiritual cognition, yet its dynamic movement, even while relying on that for its security, is not directly determined by it. To understand what he's saying, you have to keep in mind many factors. One of the factors you have to remember is the static condition and the movement. And another thing you have to remember is the oneness and the multiplicity. If you take these two into consideration, you will understand what he's saying. Okay. I read that sentence again. Okay. And yet the overmind is well aware of the essential truth of things. Essential truth it sees, but it also sees the phenomenal truths. Essential truths it sees, but also the phenomenal. In other words, the forms. It sees the oneness and yet the forms. Individual self-determination. It embraces the totality. It uses the individual self-determinations without being limited by them. At our level, we are very much limited by our way of seeing things. Okay, so individual self-determinations without being limited by them. But although it knows their oneness, can realize it in spiritual cognition, yet its dynamic movement, even while relying on that for its security, is not directly determined by it. Okay? The overmind produces the forms, but it is not fully slave to the forms. You can put it that way. At our consciousness, we are slaves to the forms. We don't see the reality, and our body-mind life is completely overshadowing our soul. We are slaves. But in the overmind consciousness, you are not slaves. You are seeing the multiplicities, and you can control them also to a certain extent, but you are free from them, separate. It's a little difficult, but you have to exercise your imagination and keep these 3-4 principles in mind. First, the one becoming the many, the unity and the multiplicity. As you keep coming down, multiplicity increases. The static condition also starts becoming movement. But somewhere in between, both the things are there. And when both are there, then the overmind is not limited and not subject to the limitations of the lower. That's what he's saying.
He says it embraces the totality.
Yes. It embraces the totality and the essentiality of things, and it is but it is creating the forms. And when it is creating the forms, there is necessarily limitation. But it is not overshadowed, it is not subjugated by the limitations. It creates a limitation, but is free of them. Okay? Overmind energy proceeds through an illimitable capacity of separation and combination of the powers and aspects of the integral and indivisible, all-comprehending unity. Now this, he has used the new word now, all-comprehending unity. There are two types of consciousnesses, a comprehending and an apprehending. Okay. The comprehending consciousness means you feel everything contained within you. You contain everything within you. In a cosmic consciousness, there are two types of cosmic consciousnesses. In one, you feel that the whole universe is within you. If you read some of those sonnets, okay. In me, he says, Arcturus and Belphegor burn. Within him, the whole universe is there within him. There is a comprehending consciousness. But there is another consciousness also, that you feel yourself to be one with everybody else. In other words, my consciousness has entered into you, and essentially I am there everywhere. Okay? That's the apprehending consciousness. So in the supermind, comprehending consciousness. In the overmind, the apprehending consciousness also started. Okay? So all comprehend, indivisible, all comprehending. It takes each aspect and power and gives to it an independent action in which it acquires a full separate importance and is able to work out, we might say, its own world of creation. Okay, so we'll put this in different words. The multiplicity starts at the overmind level. In other words, what the supermind says, I am going to produce infinite forms, but it is in conception only. In the overmind, the conception starts becoming a reality. It starts getting executed. Okay? And in the execution, the overmind permits each form that it is creating. I give you the right to express yourself fully. And if two things are there, okay, multiplicity means, let us take one example. Let us say generosity, let us say, okay, it creates generosity. But multiplicity is infinite. So it also creates the first vibrations of the opposite of generosity. Okay? And it tells both, I give you permission to express yourself fully in the physical world. So that's why you have the dualities here. All this movement is starting at the overmind level. And each of these ideas, there is a God representing this, the personal aspect of that. Okay? So, is this clear? Okay, I'll put it even more. I am creating force. So, I am creating light and force. I take two. So, I tell light, I produce you in this intensity. And you have the full power to express yourself in the intensity that you want. But the other aspect of life is darkness. So, darkness also, I give you the power to express yourself fully in the physical world. So, you get darkness. Okay? Say force. Okay? So, force, an intense force can be a cyclone. Okay? It has the full power to do whatever it wants in the physical world. A cyclone will express itself in full force and destroy. Tsunami, cyclone, typhoon. But he also creates a gentle breeze. And that also has got the full power to express itself fully in the physical world. What happens? Dualities are there in the physical world. So all the dualities are originating at the overmind level. That's what Sridhar is saying. Look at the words again carefully, you'll see. Overmind energy proceeds through an illimitable capacity of separation and combination of the powers and aspects. So each thing, it is creating illimitable capacity of separation. It is separating them. And combination also of the powers and aspects of the integral and indivisible all-comprehending unity. It takes each aspect or power, okay? We took aspect, I told you, we took one psychological condition, or we took the energy, the power, and gives to it an independent action in which it acquires a full separate importance and is able to work out, we might say, its own world of creation. So each thing created there, now you are independent and you can create whatever you want fully. That's why you have the infinite creation here. Okay. Purusha and Prakriti, conscious soul and executive force of nature, are in the supramental harmony a two-aspected single truth, being and dynamis of reality. Okay. The supermind is Satchidananda. The supermind is the Satchidananda is even higher up, but in supermind, the Satchidananda is there all as one. So, knowledge, what's the word he's using? Knowledge and will. Conscious soul is Chit, and executive force of nature is Shakti. So, knowledge and will. Okay, knowledge, conscious soul, and executive force, Chit Shakti, are in the supramental harmony a two-aspected single truth. At our if you think of the opposite, it will become clear. At our level, we have a consciousness, we have knowledge, but we don't have the power to put that knowledge into practice. I may know many things how to produce a car, but I may not have the will or the power to do it. I have the will to do it, but I don't have the technology, I don't have the knowledge. So they are separate. Knowledge and will are separate at our level, but there they are always together. In the overmind and the supermind, they are always together. In other words, whatever it wants to do, it is 100% sure to become a reality. At our level, it's not like that. We have to combine the two. Okay? So, he is using different words. Purusha, consciousness. Prakriti, force. Conscious soul, Purusha. Executive force of nature, Prakriti. Okay? So, you can use many, many different types of words. They all mean the same thing. Purusha, Prakriti. God, nature. Okay. Soul, your body, mind, life. Okay. Then your Chit, Shakti. Purusha, Prakriti, soul and nature. These are all the same basically. One side consciousness, one side force. But they are together in the supermind, and also they are there to a large extent together in the overmind consciousness. That's what he's saying. There can be no disequilibrium or predominance of one over the other. They are equal to each other. In overmind, we have the origin of the cleavage. There you are. So, Chit and Shakti start separating themselves in the overmind level. That's why when you go to the overmind level, I told you that you see a difference. You see spirit and you see also matter. You see Shakti and you also see the consciousness. You see the mutability and the immutability, and there does not seem to be any connection between them. The cleavage starts at the overmind level. But if you go to the higher supermind level, they are one. Indistinguishably one. What? Consciousness and force. Chit Shakti. Okay? In our mind, we have the origin of the cleavage, the trenchant distinction made by the philosophy of the Sankhyas, in which they appear as two independent entities. Prakriti, able to dominate Purusha and cloud its freedom and power, reducing it to a witness and recipient of her forms and actions. Okay? Purusha, able to return to its separate existence and abide in a free self-sovereignty by rejection of her original overclouding material principle. We have almost gone into the synthesis of yoga now, but it is there you have to understand. At the overmind level, consciousness and force are together. At the hour level, consciousness and force have separated themselves. The origin of the separation is in the overmind consciousness. Here, totally separate. Shakti you see everywhere. You see the wind blowing, but there doesn't seem to be consciousness in it. You see consciousness, okay, but there is something separate. They are two separate things. That's the so the Sankhya philosophy has maybe had touches of the overmind, or even in the lower planes of consciousness, they are always separate. But in the Advaita philosophy, they are always together at the highest level, but they separate themselves here. That's what he is talking about. If we then we'll have to explain a lot of what the Purusha and the Prakriti consciousness is, and we'll go into Sankhya philosophy. So that's but basically, all the things which are one there, Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda, become separated here. You may have Ananda, you may not have force. You may have force, you may not have Ananda. So, but they're all one. And the cleavage starts at the overmind level. That's what he's saying.
Like in our, like the ancient rishis, were any one of them open, like working from the overmind?
Why overmind? They even had the
Supermind.
glimpse of the supermind.
But they had a glimpse of it. But were they had a glimpse of it.
Yes.
But were they working from that plane of consciousness?
I'll put it in more trenchant words, okay? Nobody has been able to, as yet, station their consciousness permanently in the supermind.
Overmind?
Overmind, Srimdo.
Yes.
So if Srimdo has done it, definitely the rishis have done it.
Sri Aurobindo is beyond overmind, he's supermind then. So we can't take Sri Aurobindo.
No. Sri Aurobindo also had touches of the supermind, and he was getting inspiration from supermind. But if he had stabilized his consciousness in the supermind, okay, it would have been a totally different thing. It would have been a totally different thing. Even the body would have changed. And that was the work that Mother was engaged in. Changing the body and keeping her consciousness permanently in the supermind. Permanently, nobody has done yet.
But in the overmind, there were, Nalini was touching the overmind.
Oh, yes.
And many others.
Yes, yes. In fact, the whole Sankhya philosophy is based on that. Okay? So you can see, Swayambhu's language is a little difficult, because now you have to understand Purusha and Prakriti and what they mean by that. You have to go and stray off into Sankhya philosophy. So, Purusha able to return to its separate existence and abide in a free self-sovereignty by rejection of her original overclouding material principle. This last bit I will explain, okay, just now. Our soul is Purusha, pure consciousness. Shakti is producing different things at our level. The Prakriti in us is the body-mind life. Okay? The body is matter, the life is prana, and the mind is the mental principle of knowledge. So, this is one and your soul is different. Your soul is trapped like in a prison house of the body-mind life. It has to escape from there. So, at our level, Prakriti is dominant and keeping Purusha under her foot. Okay. Purusha has no power. We are not even conscious of our soul. But when you start yoga, the soul escapes from the prison house of body-mind life and begins to get power over her. Okay? And so, this is a very interesting thing, because when Sri Aurobindo is writing his romantic plays, okay, don't think he is writing only romantic plays. Okay? He is actually discussing the Purusha Prakriti principle. Note clearly how in all Vasavadatta as well as Eric, okay, and as well as the other things also, other dramas also, you will always see that the Purusha, okay, the Purusha is finally conquering Prakriti and able to say. I'll just give you one example of the of Vasavadatta. Okay, Vasavadatta is Prakriti. And she's saying, Vatsa is the prince, I will marry and I will keep him completely under my domination. Okay? This is what Prakriti is doing at our level. But who is Vatsa? Vatsa is a young boy. Okay? And how do I say that he is Purusha? Because he has no parents. That's an indication. Okay? He has no parents. Vatsa is a young boy who playfully actually makes Vasavadatta fall in love with him. So Sri Aurobindo is actually playing on this Purusha Prakriti principle in all his romantic dramas. I don't know how many people have been able to see that, but it is very clearly there.
Yeah.
Okay, in Eric also, if you remember, Eric, two girls come and they want to kill the king because he has done some injustice to them in the past. So they come to kill him. Prakriti coming to dominate and the Purusha. Finally what happens? They fall in love with the king. So, this is the Purusha Prakriti principle which Sri Aurobindo uses in his romantic dramas. So, when our soul gets free from the body-mind life, it separates itself from Prakriti and is not subject to the force and influence of Prakriti anymore. You feel yourself to be separate from it. But you still don't have the power over it. You have to go to the supramental level to get the power to change the lower. So that's the hint he is giving here. He is coming down to actually the yogic aspect. So with the other aspects and powers of the divine reality, one and many, divine personality and divine impersonality, and the rest. All the contradictions and the duality that we see here continue right up to the overmind level, but in the supermind level they become one. But the origin of all the dualities is at the overmind level. Okay, so
each is still.
Yeah. So with the other aspects of powers of the divine reality, one and many, divine personality and divine impersonality, and the rest. Actually, each of these we can discuss for a long time. What is divine personality and what is divine impersonality? Each is still an aspect and power of the one reality, but each is empowered to act as an independent entity in the whole, arrive at the fullness of the possibilities of a separate expression, and develop the dynamic consequences of that separateness. So many things are there in the world separate, and each one separate thing has got the power to express itself fully in the physical world. So multiplicity is a principle in the physical world, and the divine wants multiplicity. But if there is multiplicity, is there going to be harmony? There isn't at our level. But it is possible to have harmony, and that harmony will come when the supermind starts dominating matter. And a good example of that, multiplicity plus harmony, is the orchestra, which Sri Aurobindo uses the image. 100 instruments all playing something different. And yet there is perfect harmony. So that is what will happen, and that's where it's going towards. Okay. But that's the ultimate aim. That's why supermind, Sri Aurobindo wants a supermind to come down. And he did that 1956, we all know that. So, the dynamic consequences of the separateness. At the same time, in overmind, this separateness is still founded on the basis of an implicit underlying unity. In the overmind, there is separation and there is also a unity. Okay. All possibilities of combination and relation between the separated powers and aspects, all interchanges and mutualities of their energies are freely organized and their actuality always possible. So, it's a pretty complex because Sri Aurobindo is using very general words. So, we have to take any one example and apply to what he's saying, then it becomes clear. That's why I took one aspect only. We spoke about the wind, and we spoke also about the generosity and the opposite. Okay, so This is what happens in the overmind consciousness. It creates all these different things and allows each one to express itself fully in the world.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all. Thank you.